Hello, everybody, and welcome to another presentation of SciTechNature. It is March the 31st, 2020, and most of us are still stuck indoors. I've seen so much creative stuff occurring on the internet. It's absolutely incredible. I sometimes wonder if we shouldn't be stuck indoors more often. Let's start the presentation off with a beautiful video that was sent to me by Terra Mizwa. Spring. Thank you, Tara. We really needed that. Okay, anyway, I thought the theme of this presentation would be water. Water, of course, is something that the planet is covered in, is something that's inside us. In fact, most of what we consist of is water. What percentage of the universe is water? We don't know, but we do know there's a lot of it. I thought I would start off with a poem. It's actually from a song by Talking Heads, but I love the refrain, and it goes like this. Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground, into the blue again after the money's gone. Once in a lifetime, there's water flowing underground. And I just think that's so lovely. And I've put a link to the song down below, and I thought we would just start off with that. So let's start with the oceans, because that's where most of the water is on this planet. If you go back to the 70s, they thought that the oceans were, in their deepest parts, pretty much a desert, that there was nothing there's not much life there. And it was a complete surprise when they discovered that the mid-Atlantic ridges, that's where the oceanic plates grow from, that these areas with their hot volcanic rifts were full of life. And so I think I'll start off with the first little documentary on this particular subject. is it that creatures are so far away from the sunlight are able to have an ecosystem that allows them to thrive, single-celled animals all the way up to complex marine life without using sunlight? Well, one of the things that they discovered that was happening in the mid-Atlantic ridges and other places around the world in the deep sea was that near these volcanic vents, you end up with an area that allows for chemosynthesis instead of photosynthesis. And I have a small presentation here on the difference between photosynthesis and chemosynthesis, and I think it's worthwhile watching.
How do you make food? Well, that depends on who you are, doesn't it? I mean, if you are like me, you just make food by popping it in the oven or microwave. If you are a farmer, you make food by actually growing it before it reaches the supermarket. If you're a professional chef, then you make food with wizardry. Similarly, many living creatures use different processes for producing food. These processes are generally called photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. Let's go over their differences and the different organisms that use them. Photosynthesis is a process by which certain living creatures make sugar and oxygen from carbon dioxide and water with the use of solar energy. We can actually represent this definition with a nifty formula that you can see on screen. All I want you to grasp from this formula is that on the left side we take raw ingredients, carbon dioxide and water, and turn them into our products on the right side, which are carbohydrates or sugars and oxygen. Like you would need to use heat to bake raw ingredients into a final product, this process happens thanks to energy that's captured by sunlight. Many living things use this process to make food, including plants, which provide us with food and oxygen, algae, which serve as a food source for many organisms in the food chain, and some bacteria, such as the green sulfur bacteria. Furthermore, at least in plants and algae, the process of photosynthesis occurs in organelles called chloroplasts. Think of them as the place where the raw ingredients are cooked, sort of like an oven in our kitchen. So, to summarize, photosynthesis uses light energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates, which are sugars, and oxygen within organelles called chloroplasts. Keeping this in mind, let's compare photosynthesis to chemosynthesis. Chemosynthesis is a process whereby a carbon molecule is converted into a sugar-based food source through the oxidation of inorganic molecules as a source of energy. As just one example of this process, the following formula can be used. On the left side, we have our raw ingredients. They are oxygen, a carbon molecule, in this case it's carbon dioxide, and an inorganic molecule, in this case hydrogen sulfide. We mix our ingredients together and they produce a sugar, the CH2O, water and sulfur. In this case, there's no oven per se that cooks the meal for the bacteria that use this process to generate food. Instead, the energy for this reaction comes from the chemical reactions that occur once the raw ingredients are mixed together, sort of like when you mix baking soda and vinegar. You get a chemical reaction without the need for an oven. Bacteria found next to hydrothermal vents, whale carcasses, cold seeps, and even sunken ships are known to utilize chemosynthesis to make their own food. The key thing is that the chemosynthesis doesn't rely on sunlight, and thus deep-sea communities can still thrive despite a lack of sunlight thanks to chemosynthesis. Bacteria that utilize chemosynthesis are known to provide a source of food for organisms such as giant tube worms, which can be found living next to hydrothermal vents. I highly doubt you use photosynthesis or chemosynthesis to make your food, but maybe I'm wrong. What I do know is that plants, algae, and even some bacteria utilize photosynthesis to the same end. Photosynthesis is a process by which certain living creatures make sugar and oxygen from carbon dioxide and water thanks to the use of solar energy. In plants and algae, the process of photosynthesis occurs in organelles called chloroplasts. Bacteria can also utilize chemosynthesis to make their own food for themselves or for organisms they live alongside. Chemosynthesis is a process where a carbon molecule is converted into a sugar-based food source through the oxidation of inorganic molecules as a source of energy. The biggest takeaway from this lesson I want you to be aware of is that photosynthesis relies on light energy, while chemosynthesis does not.
So after that, I was looking around for something that was recently filmed and interesting on this particular subject. And I found this lovely article here that talks about the deep sea canyons of Australia, which just came out in March 2nd of this year. And I scrolled down and I found that there's this really fantastic uh, site here, and it has a
Parasitic snail
video
living on this specific.
which is 4 hours and 26 minutes long. Now, I thought that was a little long. So what I've gone and done is I've gone into it and I've gone and cherry picked the really interesting moments of the camera going down the bottom of this area and finding these life forms, and it's absolutely fascinating. And you can hear the scientists, some of the things they say, yeah, that's this and this. Yeah, we know what that is. And other ones you can hear them say, well, it's probably this, but we don't really know. So I'm going to pick a couple of these, and I hope you enjoy them. So as you can see here, we're now half an hour into cruising on the bottom, and it shows you that scientists are really dedicated because a lot of what they do is really boring. And suddenly, this pops up in the distance, and so they go closer to explore it. And they sort of find that they're sort of, oh, because I've watched the video, so I know what else comes up. They're sort of like on the sort of lip or the edge of a sort of forest in the in this deep part of the ocean. It's quite fascinating. And later on, they come across this. It would appear that every rock has its own plant. Sort of like maybe it's the other way around, that this is the plant's pet rock. Did you see that shrimp go by?
Now, see how a small piece of rock in the middle of this muddy plain is acting like an attraction for a small oasis of life. This is really fantastic. So you can see a small shrimp, the red gentleman on your right, a sea star, and again a few black corals. You see that they are all oriented in the same direction, so they are actually feeding. So they are expanding their polyps in the water, and the tiny current is bringing particles that they will trap and use for their own lunch. So now we are cruising again on the muddy stretch of the plain here in 3,200 meter water depth. So still there are a lot of animals crawling around. It's beautiful shrimp. Actually, our target now is to get to some wall, some relief, just to see if there is some special life there. Our mission again is to find corals, especially those corals with a skeleton, and then we can play around with the geochemistry and understand important information about water temperature, water salinity, the fertility of the ocean acidification, a lot of important issues that are now obviously a little bit on the main agenda for scientists to understand the future. Right, this bright orange animal is an anemone, sea anemone. Still always in the group of corals, black corals, white corals, all the corals that are making part of the target of this expedition. They are angularly fractured. Yeah, I think the fish is curious like we are. He is exploring us. Yeah, another beautiful sea urchin. Before we have seen a bunch of corals, soft corals mostly, no corals with a skeleton. It's very difficult to make a skeleton at such a depth here. So this beautiful coral we haven't seen before. So it's adding to the deep sea life that we are now actually seeing for the first time in the Bremer Canyon. Yeah, another interesting fish. We didn't see too many, but they were all very interesting so far. Now we follow a little bit what is doing, not much. Okay. that we will do with Malcolm. That is in another room, not here now, but he was the PI of the previous expedition that we also participated to, and it was in the Perth Canyon that we are going to revisit in 2 weeks from now. Anyhow, is more to the west, and well, actually, okay, something to see. A squid. That's the first squid we have seen so far. Let me see if I can get closer. All right. Oh, interesting. I think that we are watching him with a lot of interest. I never saw it before, frankly, but it's also true the opposite. Is staring at us. Is trying to understand what is this yellow and silver machine in his kingdom. We are just invaders, or okay, say visitors. Well, this graceful sea cucumber is playing a delicate dance for us. They are very different from those that we are used to see at shallow water, that really look like cucumbers. These graceful creatures, actually, they don't really immediately remind us to be sea cucumbers, but they are. This is a way that some of these animals are using to displace from a place to another by using the currents. They are largely made up by water, so it's very easy for them to float. They have no shell, nothing. They expand and then go with the wind. And the wind here is just the current. I hope that you are enjoying as we are enjoying. This is incredible sight. Hundreds of British stars feeding on the edge of this single block. This is quite a scene. So the floating thing is, of course, is a crustacean, perhaps belonging to one of those denizen like isopods and so on. Obviously wanted to be, actually is acting for us. Okay, thank you. And yeah, wow. I think Andrew, the crustacean specialist, is happy. And the sac-like thing beneath actually is a glass sponge. So his body is strengthened by a connection of spicules, so by silica, by quartz particles. It's not exactly quartz, but it's not too far away from being quartz. And they make this complicated skeleton. Okay, this alien spacecraft here is a jellyfish. That's the information that the biologist providing. We have no reason not to believe that. It is always amazing to observe how colorful is the animal world that is living in total darkness. Well, I think that today we observe a lot of graceful dancer during our trip. Well, finally, somebody that enjoyed a spot here in the galley. So we have this beautiful anemone. Also there are, I see some sea lily around, but this is the big one that is attracting our attention. We have already seen a couple of those.
Be careful, there's electrical stuff down there.
Would you see internodes? Hey, welcome. I don't see internodes.
No.
There's one right there.
Maybe there's one right there.
A lot of emotion. We are trying to classify the animal with mixed results so far. I would say now that this bizarre creature is a worm. Yeah, is a polychaete. Maybe a polychaete. We don't understand because it's very strange. I mean, we see a tube that seems to be the tube of a polychaete, but the pinkish thing, I don't know. So now we will have an interview among the team member. We begin with the credited biologist. Andrew, your opinion is just a guess.
So what I'm seeing is here are fecal pellets coming out of
Fecal
what looks
pellets,
like the gut,
yeah.
and that would presumably be the mouth up here. And you can see on either side is a rather translucent body.
Right.
I see no segments along the body, so I don't think it would be an annelid. So the segmented worms like earthworms. Or
All right. So it's not probably a polychaete, right?
possibly like an acorn worm or
Acorn worm. This is another option.
they're pretty rare, aren't they?
You may realize that being the first on a spot and not be yeah. Okay, I start to have it. Now we are thinking about a transparent body. What we are seeing possibly are just a pseudofacies. So the pink is roughly the head. What we see, what has been ingested, we see by transparency. But this is only just to speak among friends, without taking any commitment that we are telling anything that is necessarily correct. In this case, it would make sense.
Are we good to put it in the big bio box?
Yep.
Okay.
The bamboo coral and
Yeah, that would be fine.
Right, this amazing creature sitting on the only piece of soft rock we see around here is a stalk sponge. Stalk, yeah, there is stalk sponge. It is getting nutrients by filtering the water column. So there are very small holes in the skeleton, and they only certain sort of particles may be get inside and used by the sponges. Right, that is another sea snail, but is long dead, and now the shell, finally real shell, is used by hermit crabs, because since we were kids, we know that hermit crabs are using dead shells. So this is the case. And now we are going to try to collect one of the corals with the hope that is exactly one of those that Paul and Malcolm and Julie are looking for.
So there you are. I've taken out all the sexy bits. If you want to watch the whole thing, it's down here. You can have a whole 4.5 hours of delightful watching. It's almost like, having a fireplace burning video. So you can enjoy it for just the value of the peace and tranquility that it brings. And also, Rob Lerner sent a message this week. He writes, here is one of the best and most recent treatments of the COVID-19 I've read in a while, by Ed Yong, author of I Contain Multitudes, the microbiome, as well as that hilariously horrifying TED Talk on parasites that I shared a while back. I've placed it down here, and read the article at your leisure. Also, we had a link sent to us by Tom Snyder, member of the SciTechNature group, on Canada's quest for national lichen. Interesting article. I read it. You might want to as well, down below. And that is our presentations for this Tuesday. If you have any presentations you'd like to submit or any links that you have, please send them along and we'll put them on with the presentations. And I hope to see you next week. Any questions you have, any comments, everything is welcome. And I'll see you next week. Miss you all. Bye-bye.
How did I get here?